you've approached and experienced food for yourselves and for other people. Something that I'm curious about, though, this was a question that was going to happen later, but I thought I'd ask now since it was brought up that you mentioned meeting Amy when she was in grad school. I wanted to ask about your love story. That there's such a mutuality between you, a co-visioning, a respect.
You want to see the scars? There are a lot of dishes there that were fought over.
Well, how did you meet? What is your story together?
Tell us about the fights.
Well, we met through activism.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in the KDP, which was the left group, the Filipino expats, I guess, that were here, exiled from the Philippines because of the martial law. Which really, to me, I mean, there were a lot of problems with it, you know, and I eventually broke away from them, but because of excess. As usual, you know, in any movement there are extremes, and you know, there are things that, you know, but I learned so much, you know, like in how to look at society and all the developments and all that. So we were very active. We were organizing, meeting as many community members as possible. So one of the community you know, one of the group of people we targeted were students. So and then, you know, there were all these Filipino students that were at a party or something, and then we had our newspaper, the Ang Katipunan, AK. So we always went to, you know, community group events, and we'd be selling them and giving out flyers, and always, you know, fight against martial law, release the political prisoners was the demand, you know, because no habeas corpus, you know. So that was what we were always fighting. And then, you know, we got it. He was there. He was unluckily there. And we invited him to join our meetings, and he would come. And turns out he was progressive. And
So the bonding over politics, and how did that sort of, you know, evolve into?
well, I found out he was a chef, right? I mean, and I like baking, you know. So actually, because he was working for that group of restaurants, he was able to get me, because when I graduated, I got my master's degree in mass comm. The university hired me to be a lecturer for like a couple of years. And one of the restaurants that, you know, where he worked at, like they owned several restaurants, right? A couple of restaurants. I mean, he was able to get me a job as a pastry cook. So I worked as a pastry cook for like 2 summers. From the Frog.
Where is that?
The Frog Commissary.
Le Grand.
The commissary in Philadelphia. They have a very nice cookbook. It's still around if you look for it.
Your version, Rom.
I was asleep. So. Yeah, so I met some Filipino students at Temple University, and they invited me to a party. And you know, then Amy and the KDK people also were there. We're trying to recruit people.
Yeah, we got you.
So that's basically it.
Yeah, thank Marcos.
Oi. Oi.
Amy was involved with the nurses' work also, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He was.
They were deporting nurses who failed the exam, the licensing. See, what they would do is they would recruit all these Filipino, well, not just Filipino nurses, but, and bring them here. And then they had a few months to study and then take a licensing exam. And if they failed the exam, they lose their visas. Then they became illegal. So, undocumented. So, there were a lot and who just made TNT, right? So, and a lot of them, they were highly educated nurses that had to work as nurses' aide or licensed practical nurses, just so that they could earn. I mean, they were used by the healthcare system as cheap labor. So, well, what we did was we did national petition campaign. We got millions and millions of signatures all over the country. And we were very lucky that it was called the INS then, not ICE, right? Immigration Naturalization Services. We were very lucky at that time that the commissioner was, I think, Puerto Rican, married to a Filipino. So he met with the group and they gave us the DVD program, the deferred voluntary basis. So we were able to win 2 years for the nurses to stay here legally to study until they pass the exam. And then once they pass the exam, they could get their visas again. So that worked out. And then somebody said to me, they're probably the Trump voters now. So I said, oh my God, you just destroyed my life.
Oh yeah, and then we were asked to move to New York. I think this was late 70s or 80, right? We moved
79.
Yeah, we moved to help organize more Filipinos here. That's relevant. The whole chapter of moved to New York. So I got basically jobs all over, and Amy was working as a secretary or something. So we were
The
full-time
church-
activists.
Yeah, because the United Church Board supported what we did, so I worked there. and then I decided I want. And then after a while, I got really burnt out. I said I was just. I think that was it. And I said I said to myself, what is the one thing that you have no idea or just totally ignorant about? And I said, I have no idea what goes on in Wall Street. So I decided I wanted to work there. So I worked there. I started as a secretary and then got promoted to an AVP and was working for. Then I learned a lot how much of a casino Wall Street was. I know what's going on there. It's hard to.
How did you sort of, well, how did you decide and end up in this place in a world of food? Like, how did that become a more significant part of your life together? He was a chef. And then how did you make the decision to open Asuncion?
I think in terms of, in my case, I was getting to the point that I always get hired as a chef for something that's not me. You make Italian food, you make French food, or a combination of other things. And a lot of these places also have learned that what my style is and differences, but it is not really, it's not really fully expressed. And so at some point we said, Tama na, I want to cook something that I really care about. So we started thinking of what are we gonna do. So it boils down to really Filipino food. So that's how it started. And
Yeah, I think if you really look at the history of restaurant, I don't know if people are too young here, but you know, like when we got here, like in the 80s, it's like the restaurant world was not defined by the personalities of chefs. Chefs were not stars then. Only a few, you know, were beginning to be recognized. So if you opened up a restaurant, there was like this standard thing that you had to do, right? But it's now, if you open a restaurant, it's gotta be your personality, right? Your food, your cooking. And you have to be different from everybody. It's totally different. I'm just thinking like a few decades ago, that wasn't the case. So that's just how much the restaurant world has evolved now.
where did you get the money?
We robbed the bank.
I wanted to save time for questions, so I'll ask my last one, which is the classic dinner party question. So, dead or alive, for each of you, who dead or alive or transcendent, who would you have as a dinner guest, and what would you make for them?
What is the question?
Who would you have over for dinner, and what would you make them?
Dead or alive.
Oh, dead.
Dead or alive? Better dead. Then there's no chance of having them. The Pope! I would like to feed the Pope. The Pope.
What are you gonna make?
Huh? You are?
What are you gonna
Oh.
make the
Chicago style hot dog.
I don't really know, but I have a negative answer. But it's so when we moved to New York, I got a good job as it's a good restaurant, and I learned a lot there. It's a new American. It was a new American restaurant, and then
That was the first new American restaurant.
yeah. So I became a lunch chef there. So I got, as I told you, I got to do all my menus there. And then at some point, the owner talked to me and said, Romy, can you do something special? The features editor of Vogue is coming for lunch. And I said, I don't cook for Vogue.
And you walked out.
And I walk out.
And then years later,
Yeah, there's a, okay. So years later, when we opened Asuncion, one of the servers talked to me and said, there are two gentlemen there in the booth, and one is kind of writing, and maybe you would want to talk to them. And so I went and I talked to them a little by little, and then one of them handed me a card. Jeff Steingarten, food editor, Vogue. And the other one was the former New York Times food critic, Ray Sokolow. And so I went back to the kitchen and I made a big fuss about it. And I talked to them about my experience before, and I said, I own this restaurant now. I kiss ass.
And you know, he wrote about it. He wrote about it in Vogue, saying, the chef seems to be singing a different tune now.
Thank you for that story. Does anyone have a question that they would like to ask? I don't know if this comes over.
So
We have a lot of history.
yeah, so we do have a lot of history. I don't have a question.
Oh,
So I have a tribute, actually. I have, as you said, I've watched your journey. When I came to America in 1978, up until the time I went to your restaurant in 1990, my Filipino journey was about being invisible. There were no mentors. And then came your restaurant. It was in Soho. It wasn't a Dorotan stand. It was a menu that was singular vision, French techniques. It was unlike anything we'd ever seen. It was definitely brought out of pride. I remember seeing this row of vinegars. I'd never seen anyone care about vinegars. And Romy would tell me about all these different vinegars. I would hear about their trips to the Philippines to find a bangus place where the pond was not dirty and, right? Like it didn't taste like dirt. I was like, who cared about
remember that?
Yeah, all that. Like I never met anyone who cared about food this much. And you grew up with saying Filipino food will never take off in the U.S. So to see someone deliver food with such pride, and then you would see Romy in Time Out, New York Magazine, New York Times. You were a symbol of pride for me, Romy. And when I first met Ami, I heard the story. Yeah, I left Wall Street to open this restaurant, and I was like, who does that? But it was in Soho, and it was very a snooty neighborhood that Ami created a space that was very welcoming. We spent all of our special occasions, but even outside of that, especially when you brought in Perry, it became an artist haven. And with that, it became a lesbian gay haven, which back then was a very violent time. But you were parents that gave us a safe space and give us freedom pets sometimes. And sometimes Romy would be like, I need pineapple, can you give me pineapple? And I would just run errands for him. But it was really you who created a community for us.
And you.
We did it. I don't want to take any credit because you could have chosen to go another way and kept it like a Soho restaurant, but you didn't. It was a very, very open space. It is a space that I grew up in, and even after you closed, because I moved to Manila, I followed you, and we went to the Instressel home, and I knew Neil, so I knew about your book, and I knew about all of the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that book. Purple Yam, of course. So I just wanted to say, oops, hang on.
Oh my God.
I wrote this. So I wanted to say, for me, you're a symbol of pride, bold vision, and uncompromising. You have shaped me, and I thank you for instilling those values in me.
beautiful. Thank you. Questions? Any other comments? That's a hard act to follow.
It's a question. I mean, it's just more of a curiosity. I don't really want to be in the spotlight. But I was just wondering, I guess, like, open